Prometheon. 13 years ago. The field Prometheon ran through was thick with high grass. It tickled his face, brushed the fingers on his hands as he stretched his arms out. Butterflies flew up from the grass, seeking a less tumultuous resting place as Prometheon barreled through. He glanced behind to see how far away his pursuer was. A tall man, handsome, smiling, was jogging behind him, keeping pace but never advancing. "Come on! Catch me!" Prometheon yelled. "Be careful and watch where you're going!" Prometheon glanced to his right. In the near distance, his mother picked fruit from a blueberry bush and waved to him with her free hand. His father stood near her, smoking a pipe and quietly watching Prometheon and his pursuer. The field dipped down, and Prometheon slowed as he controlled his descent to the bottom, where a pond sparkled. A few shade trees surrounded the bare banks. One of the trees sported a rope swing that hung from a thick branch. If he could beat the man to the swing, he'd promised to push him so he could swing into the pond as many times as he liked before his mother came to bring him home for supper. After chancing a glance behind him, the smile on Prometheon's face only grew wider. He was going to win. A dip in the dirt tripped him up. The tall grass blocked his view of his own feet. When he regained his balance, he stopped in his tracks. Another man stood in front of him, blocking the bright, beautiful sun. The smile he wore on his face caused the one on Prometheon's to fade. He looked behind him for his pursuer, but the friendly, tall man was gone, and so were his parents. When he turned back, the other smiling man was closer. Clouds rolled into view, covering the once clear sky in darkness. With a glance over his shoulder at the sky, the smiling man chuckled.
"You are quite interesting," the man said.
"Help!" Prometheon blurted.
"He's gone,"
the man whispered as Prometheon looked around for the tall man that had been chasing him.
"Don't worry. You can play with me."
Prometheon wanted to turn, to yell for his mother, to run, but he did not. Without any provocation, tears began slipping down his cheeks. The man in front of him smiled again, as the black cloak he wore began to smoke and stretch, his body growing, blocking the sun like a towering tree. Prometheon knew that everything was wrong. He raised his hand, and Prometheon's arms and legs were snatched in opposite directions, spread by chains that appeared from nowhere. Prometheon tried to scream, but he could not. The man's outstretched arm lifted, and Prometheon rose from the ground in response, still spread-eagled. The man looked up at him, staring but saying nothing.
You see my face, don't you?
The color of my eyes.
The shape of my nose?"
Prometheon nodded rapidly. The man laughed.
"If you give me some time, I'll make sure we can meet and play again, in the real world."
The grass around the man wilted, and it continued on, moving like a wave as the dying grass swayed in the strong breeze. The man smiled and stiffened, as if just smelling the odor of the dead grass around him. He looked over his shoulder and froze. Prometheon looked down at him, sweating, heart racing. He still did not move.
"Hey!"
Prometheon called down to him. "Please let me go." He was still frozen, looking over his shoulder. Finally, he shimmered, like a mirage, and another figure moved through it. A woman stood where he'd been frozen and looked up at Prometheon with milk-white eyes. "Help!" he yelled down to her. She looked down at the grass around her, at the field, and then up at him, at the chains that stretched infinitely, suspending him. She'd definitely seen him. "Help!" he yelled again. "Please, my mother—"
"Quiet,"
the woman hissed. floating up to him.
We are pressed for time. I have precious few words I can use to prepare you. I am restricted in the same way your flesh is. They have been monitoring you, and I am an anomaly in their system.
Please, Prometheon whispered. I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go. If the tears flowing down his cheeks moved her, she didn't show it. She frowned at him, annoyance lining her brow with creases.
Stop struggling. There's nothing you can do.
Her face softened after the harsh words. She put a cool hand on his forehead.
Relax. We don't have much time. The door I have opened here will close, and they will find us. Where did you leave the man who chased you? Did he come from your home? Did he see where you live?
Prometheon did not remember. He didn't remember anything before he was running through that field. The man chasing him was his friend. My mother, he's my friend.
Did you show him your village?
I don't know.
Can you see it from here?
No, Prometheon said, confused by her barrage of questions. She put a hand on his bony shoulder and squeezed lightly before floating away from him and looking around.
Good. The man who did this to you, he isn't coming back. I stopped him. When you wake up...
Her voice cut off sharply into complete silence, as if someone had plugged his ears. No, not like that at all. This was so much more complete. It was as if sound didn't exist. The woman looked alarmed, and she put her hand to his ear. Her fingers came back wet with blood. His heart began to beat faster and faster and faster, until it was a fist beating at his ribs to get free. He coughed, wet and phlegmy, as blood began pouring from his lips and nose. The woman wiped the blood away, dismayed. His vision blurred, even as he watched her open mouth, yelling words he couldn't hear. His ears popped, and suddenly he could hear her yells, muted and impossible to distinguish. His hearing was returning, even as he was dying, but he had to know the answer. Her yells grew louder and louder.
For the woods!
She gripped his shoulders, right in his face, yelling.
When they come...
He woke, sucking in a huge breath and letting it out again, before sucking in another. He could hardly get enough of the air. Cool air quickly made the sheen of sweat on his skin uncomfortable. He sat as still as possible, trying to calm his hammering heart. It had felt so real to him. He slowly brought his hands up to his face, feeling his mouth and nose, and then his ears. Nothing but the moistness of the sweat on his skin. He let out a long sigh of relief, the tension slipping away, his heart rate dropping down to a normal pace. It had been a dream after all. Night was still cloaking the sky. A big full moon glowed, shedding soft light on his belongings. He looked down at his hands, which were still trembling. He had to forget the dream. It was still the dead of night, and he had chores to do in the morning. Footsteps echoed down the hall behind the ancient as he stood on a balcony, looking out at the land and water below.
Melthios?
Yes? Melthios asked, turning away from the scenery. Standing in one of the few doors that were actually permanent was an ancient named Kalendros. His shimmering black robes were held closed by a near-invisible belt, keeping the cloth tight on his well-muscled frame. Stern brown eyes and thick eyebrows sat on his face. He smoothed the dark mustache on his upper lip repeatedly. Melthios returned his gaze to Kalendros' eyes. He saw fear and hardly contained excitement. The two went together with young, brash gods like Kalendros, eager to prove themselves. Melthios stared at him and gestured impatiently.
What is it? We found her,
Kalendros blurted.
You found who?
Melthios asked.
We found Cassiopeia.
Melthios frowned, straightening his back and swallowing before he spoke.
Where? Well, we found her weaseling into a human's dream. The Dreamwalkers picked up on her presence. We don't know what she was doing, but we caught her before she could finish.
Dreamwalkers? They'd been practically useless for hundreds of years. Monitoring human dreams was a practice that had faded as humanity became more resistant to it.
Do we know where she is right now? Well, no, we don't know for sure, but I think Kalendros, you have this annoying habit of beating about the bush. Spit it out, man. What did you come to me for? The human in the dream. He's a boy Morpheus has been monitoring for some time. His dreams, that is. And on a now consistent basis. No matter what the dream consists of. Well, ancients have been spotted in his dreams.
What was Morpheus still doing monitoring dreams? More importantly, why hadn't he notified him sooner if something of note had been discovered? Kalendros stared at him for a few moments longer before he frowned.
Melthios, did you hear me?
Melthios shrugged.
So?
He finally replied.
He dreams of gods or dogs or candy houses. He's a child. He knows what you look like. What Morpheus looks like. And others.
Melthios didn't say anything for a moment.
That's impossible. It came directly from Morpheus' mouth.
Melthios hid his frown from Kalendros. Morpheus. A name he hated to hear coming from someone's mouth with such obvious admiration. It almost made him sick.
Why hasn't this child been found and dealt with? What the hell does Morpheus think he's doing? Why did he wait so long to do something, to say something about it? This is very serious. Has the rest of the council been notified? The council is having an emergency meeting. I came to round you up. I thought you would be here.
Melthios nodded.
Let's go then.
Melthios gestured and opened a doorway into the council room, walking through with Kalendros only a step behind. All the other ancients were seated around a big, angular table that served as both furnishing and technological aid. One of the bare, charcoal-colored walls sported floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a view of the tiny planet below them. No one cared to look down at it from the windows today. Morpheus sat at the head of the table, chatting with another member of the council. He glanced in Melthios' direction as he approached and took his seat. Melthios could feel the air around him. It was thick with worry, and with an emotion that was unfamiliar to gods. Fear. He did his best to ignore it as he sat down without a word to Morpheus. Ashta, another ancient, clapped her hands together after Kalendros settled in his seat.
Now that everyone is assembled, we can begin.
Wonderful,
Morpheus said.
I will take the floor, if no one minds. Dreams, after all, are my jurisdiction. I tire of waiting in anticipation.
A muscular, dark-skinned ancient named Genanthera muttered.
Well, if no one objects, Morpheus has the floor,
Ashta said. Melthios glanced at Morpheus, then turned to say something to Ashta. He bit his tongue and clenched his fists under the table. Dreams weren't his jurisdiction. Not anymore. He'd given that up willingly.
Our system was created by architects from a generation ago. The humans of that time weren't resistant to dreamwalking. Now, however, it has become increasingly difficult to probe dreams. Humanity has developed some sort of evolutionary mental shield against it. So when the system picks up suspicious activity, I take notice. As you have all come to know, if you did not know it before, Cassiopeia has surfaced. Although her current whereabouts aren't known, she came out of hiding long enough to fiddle around in some human boy's dreams. This alone is disconcerting. Combine that with the fact that this boy dreams of us, whether it be a game of tag in the woods with his friends and dancing bears, or whatever human children dream about. Consistently, we show up in his dreams. In fact, not only do we show up, he knows what our faces look like. Now I ask you, how can he know what our faces look like if he has never seen us?
Who exactly is he seeing?
Do you know?
It can't possibly be all of us. Morpheus nodded.
It isn't. He sees Melthios. I believe he has seen me, and I believe he has seen Isagon.
Murmurs broke out at the mention of the name. Morpheus looked around the table, and his eyes settled on Melthios.
And out of everyone, Melthios' face shows up the most.
What are you saying? Melthios snapped.
I'm not accusing you of anything,
Morpheus replied calmly.
I'm making you aware of the fact that this boy, for whatever reason, has a special interest in you.
What do you mean, special interest? How can you be interested in something you shouldn't even know exists? Morpheus, get on with the facts and leave conjecture for some other topic. Morpheus chuckled.
Melthios, this is important. This situation is unprecedented. I waited until I knew there was a threat to divulge information about this, so I could avoid any panic.
Melthios' lips flattened into a hard line. Morpheus paused, waiting for any questions. He stared at Melthios, waiting for him to say something, but Melthios just shook his head and balled his fists underneath the table.
Do we know what she was doing there?
In his dream, an ancient named Sven asked.
We don't have that capability. I'll assume that somehow she knew he was a person of interest and sought to warn him. I don't know how and I don't know why, but she has only accelerated and upgraded our response. That's why we are here? To determine a response?
Genanthera asked.
Not to reinvigorate our efforts to find Cassiopeia?
His question was greeted by silence. Morpheus glanced around the table before he spoke.
Genanthera, believe me when I say I understand your reasons for wanting Cassiopeia located, and we will find her. But this takes priority. You of all people understand doing what's best for all of us, regardless of personal feelings.
Genanthera stared at him for a few moments before he nodded.
Okay, so has there been anything from the Fallen?
Morpheus straightened. Melthios glanced at the other members of the council, and it became clear very quickly that Genanthera had voiced a concern all of them harbored. The Fallen, as much as they hated to admit, were words that struck a deep chord of dread. Morpheus felt the change in the room and approached the question carefully.
To my knowledge, Cassiopeia isn't affiliated with the Fallen. They have been confined to their realm and haven't ventured out of it. I don't believe we should anticipate any sort of interference from them.
Is it possible that Cassiopeia got information or help from one of the Fallen? Isagon certainly would have reason to assist her.
Morpheus cut Crucera off quickly, letting a smile briefly stretch his mouth before speaking.
Isagon, of all of the Fallen, is the least of our worries. He would do everything in his power to restrict any of his colleagues from straining the peace we have. He wouldn't help Cassiopeia. She is everything he hates. Chaos, blind passion. She's indomitable. A woman who reacts strictly on loyalty to her emotions. She ruins everything she lays hands on.
Crucera nodded, but didn't seem entirely satisfied with the answer. Melthios knew that the rest of the council acknowledged Morpheus as the most powerful of the ancients, but Isagon had been Morpheus' equal, or better, in every way.
How much does the boy know? And how much is pure coincidence?
Orosuke asked.
He's the one variable in the equation we know nothing about. I don't know, honestly,
Morpheus said.
But it is clear what we must do.
No one said anything. Melthios frowned. He looked around to each of the ancients assembled.
Come on now. No one agrees? Have we been away from battle so long that even the most bloodthirsty of you has become tentative?
Ashta looked at Morpheus, and her eyes widened with recognition. A scowl shadowed her face.
This has nothing to do with bloodlust. It is clear that this boy is at best an anomaly, and at worst, a threat. We wipe him off the map.
I agree. In fact, I think we should destroy the entire town,
Kalindros said.
The entire town?
Ashta asked, looking at Kalindros.
When did you develop such bloodlust, Kalindros?
The death of a village of humans is nothing,
Kalindros said, looking at her.
Do you not agree?
Ashta made an annoyed sound and looked back to Morpheus.
So, what are you recommending, Morpheus? You are in charge of dreams, and I, unfortunately, do not have a vote in this matter.
Melthios looked at her, but she did not notice. He held his tongue still.
Well,
he seemed to contemplate the ideas passed around, his head bent in thought.
Who knows what the boy is capable of? It is good policy to cleanse the entire area. I think Kalindros is right.
Kalindros' face lit up, and he sat up straighter, an action that didn't go unnoticed by both Azragoth and Melthios. Morpheus nodded.
Yes, that boy cannot escape. If Cassiopeia has taken special interest in him, if she openly bared herself to our sight after being hidden for so long, just so she can speak to a boy in his dreams, this can only mean some sinister plot.
Involving a human?
Corinth asked. Morpheus looked at him. He didn't like being challenged.
Who knows what she's doing? And given her history, who knows what that child is?
Jananthera flinched and straightened in his chair. Corinth simply rolled his eyes.
Your insensitivity is ridiculous, Morpheus.
Morpheus looked at Jananthera as if he'd just realized what he'd said. Jananthera held up a hand.
I appreciate your concern for my feelings, Corinth, but if we're dealing with reality here, we should deal with it. Morpheus brings up a very valid point.
Corinth nodded.
You're right,
Jananthera.
Morpheus,
Melthios began.
You knew about this boy before any of us. Why didn't you come to us sooner, before this became such an important issue? I thought it best to handle things without too much fuss. I was going to send a few vanquishers in the night and kill the boy in his sleep, keeping you all none the wiser.
Melthios slapped his hand down on the table.
that was not your decision to make alone. At the very least, you should have consulted me on this issue.
Melthios, now's not the time,
Ashta said. Please.
He's right. I see now that things have progressed much further than I ever intended. With Cassiopeia's involvement, I don't want to let this get out of our reach. I apologize for not seeking your input sooner.
Morpheus looked at Melthios and was met with a scowl.
What's done is done,
he muttered. Ashta stood without further word and opened a doorway.
If this matter is concluded, I would take leave of the council and return to my quarters. I'm not needed for further discussion amongst ourselves, unless other decisions are to be made or other members have concerns to raise formally.
Of course,
Orosuke said.
I do believe we are wrapping things up here.
Everyone else nodded in agreement, so Ashta turned without making a sound and disappeared into the light. After a few moments of silence, Morpheus coughed into the dead air to get everyone's attention.
Melthios,
Morpheus called.
You will oversee it?
We are just going to continue without her? She's the moderator,
Corinth said incredulously. Morpheus blinked a few times and looked around the table before settling back on Corinth.
Corinth, the matter of what we should do is settled. All we need to do now is agree on someone to carry out the measures agreed upon. Ashta doesn't need to be here for that, and we would do well to spare her further agitation.
Why are you suggesting me?
Melthios asked quietly, ignoring the conversation between Morpheus and Corinth. Morpheus turned to Melthios and gave a smile.
I overstepped my bounds and wish to offer oversight to you, as a gesture of good faith. The boy should hold special interest to you, considering the contents of his dreams.
And the destruction of a human village requires such overkill? Send a few vanquishers in to complete the job. This isn't an army, it's a village.
What if Cassiopeia intervenes?
Sven asked.
What if?
Melthios shrugged.
I don't deal in what ifs.
She will intervene. Make no mistake about that.
Jananthera said.
The question is how, not if. Are you doubting Melthios' abilities, Jananthera? Of course not,
Jananthera replied.
Melthios knows I hold him in high regard.
I think you are a good choice,
Kalindro said.
You are efficient and motivated. Fine,
Melthios said.
Enough of this bickering. I will send 3 dozen vanquishers. If Cassiopeia interferes somehow or shows her face, I will kill her. 3 dozen? How quickly can the architects have them forged?
Corinth asked.
I only say this because we are on a tight schedule. You'd rather I get involved? Revealing oneself in the human world isn't as wonderful an idea as it once was.
There are vanquishers that are stored away.
Whatever we have on hand will have to suffice.
But there should be at least 2 dozen.
Good enough,
Melthios said, nodding. He slapped both hands on the table.
Are we done here? I'd wager that we are,
Corinth replied.
And I'd rather not revisit this topic ever again.
Do not fail, Melthios,
Morpheus said. Melthios spun back around to face Morpheus, who was standing at the head of the table. All the other ancients were standing as well.
Fail? The thought didn't cross my mind.
Cassiopeia is a tricky woman,
Morpheus said.
She has her ways.
And I have mine,
Melthios replied.
As I stated earlier, and will state again, if Cassiopeia interferes, I will kill her. Does that suffice?
Morpheus smiled and nodded. Melthios moved his face into something of the same. The rest of the council began to disassemble around them. Melthios stood staring at Morpheus. Morpheus stared back, glancing occasionally to watch the others leaving the room. The last doorway closed, and Melthios stood up straighter.
Melthios, I had every intention...
Don't! It's my jurisdiction. Mine! I don't believe a word you say. How did you know Cassiopeia meddled in the dream? What does meddling entail? None of the others. Not even Ashta stopped to ask you that. There's no way you can know so much about the contents of his dreams without having him under heavy surveillance.
Morpheus didn't say anything. Melthios stared at him, and as he stared, wheels turned, gears clicked. His eyes widened. Morpheus smiled.
You have additional methods we don't know about. And I assume Cassiopeia has some of the same abilities. He
frowned.
You laid a trap for her?
It wasn't my intention, Melthios, to steal your limelight or infringe upon your duties. I respect you.
Melthios didn't answer him.
However, this particular situation, I felt, required a more experienced hand. Yes, I have been watching him for quite some time, and I begin to suspect I wasn't the only one once I discovered what he dreamed of.
How many dreameries?
More than a dozen. Like we were there.
Melthios shook his head.
How?
I don't know,
Morpheus said with a sigh.
When I attempted to find out, Cassiopeia stopped me.
He stared at Melthios.
She should not be capable of that.
How dare you even bring up the notion that I might fail in front of the rest of the council like that?
Melthios asked.
Calm down. I had no malicious intent. I just wanted you to be wary.
Of what? A human child? There's no way I can fail.
We've made the mistake of underestimating Cassiopeia's foolishness in the past. Don't do it again, Melthios. This may seem like a simple matter, but it is not.
Melthios put his hands on his hips, and Morpheus nodded after a few moments of waiting for a rebuttal.
I'll be on my way then.
Melthios watched him walk a few steps before opening a doorway and stepping through it. The gold footprints he left on the floor faded in his wake. Melthios stared at the empty table in front of him, and when he could take it no longer, he let out a howl of frustration. Prometheon could not shake his feeling, even when he awoke again, lying in his bed. It was just before dawn, a glow suffusing the skyline, heralding the arrival of the sun. He coughed lightly, rubbing his eyes. The air smelled funny and tasted strange. Snorting first, then coughing again, he rubbed his eyes, which were becoming watery. He sniffed loudly, and the smell he'd awoken to finally registered in his head.
Prometheon!
It was his mother's voice, preceding her presence on the stairs. She burst into his small room, still in her nightgown, carrying a hammer. Prometheon stared at her as she grabbed a fistful of his shirt and pulled him from the sheets. "Mother!" She opened the window and a gust of hot, smoky air greeted them.
Jump!
She yelled. Prometheon could hear other screams now, getting louder and louder as his mother prodded him out the window.
No!
His father. That was his father's voice.
Out the window now!
He turned to look at his mother and saw something big come through the doorway to his room. His mother glanced back and pushed him over the edge. He fell, landing on his feet and immediately collapsing to the side, pain shooting through his legs into the base of his spine. Chaos unfolded around him. Loose farm animals ran through the narrow dirt street as everything burned around them. He hadn't heard any of it. Prometheon lay frozen in fear and confusion as he registered the dead bodies all around him. Hulking monsters in armor moved back and forth, cutting down the men fighting them, and the women, and the children. He threw up and wiped his mouth. One of the monsters came through the doorway of a burning hut, shedding the body draped against him, and stared him down with a detached violence. He moved towards him with speed, brandishing his bloody sword. Prometheon's father burst from the doorway of their home with an axe, swinging with all his strength, an overhead blow that cut down through the collarbone and through flesh and protective steel. He yanked the blade free as Prometheon's mother grabbed him by the shirt, shaking him up from the ground.
Go!
His father cried as he turned to join the men trying to hold back the monsters.
Prometheon!
She screeched, clutching him, tugging him to his feet. But Prometheon was limp with fear, with shock. Debris rumbled through in a wave, carried by burning gray smoke, as a building finally gave way and collapsed.
Run, Prometheon!
She screamed, gripping the front of his shirt and shaking it. He stared at her, numb, and saw fear pouring from her eyes into his. Instinct told his frozen body it was time to move. Burning embers floated through the hazy smoke. People ran by them on the street, dropping clothing and other possessions in their haste to escape. One of the monsters cut down a man, and he toppled, his body quickly trampled by other fleeing people. He turned as Prometheon hobbled down the street, followed by his mother, shoving him along. His father ducked under a heavy shield blow, swinging his axe upward with all his might. Prometheon turned back to glance at his father as the monster fell. His father looked back at him, tears running down his cheeks, cutting lines through the ash and soot already gathering there. He smiled, and then he was turning away, back to battle, and his mother was yanking Prometheon along. Coldness clutched Prometheon's stomach, swallowed his soul. Somehow, he knew he would not see his father again. Another building folded, the walls crumbling inward and sending dust and smoke gusting out into the street. Prometheon looked back to see if his father was emerging from the smoke. He still heard screams and shouts, further away now.
Prometheon!
His mother yelled again, turning and grabbing him by his nightshirt, pulling him away from the cloud of dust and smoke. He stumbled, smoke stinging his eyes, giving him a reason to free the tears he wouldn't have been able to hold back anyway. He willed his feet to move faster. No one was coming after them, and he didn't see any other villagers ahead of him. The street around them was more overgrown with foliage. He felt his mother's trembling grip tighten on his hand as she pulled him along, refusing to look back. Boots were hitting the ground, coming close enough that he could hear them. He glanced over his shoulder to see two of the monsters following. "Keep running," his mother urged. He tripped. When everything hinged on their escape, he tripped, his fingers slipping from his mother's grip as he hit the ground and rolled. She stopped and turned around to see the first monster slide to a stop in front of Prometheon, who looked up at his doom and couldn't move. With a scream, his mother crashed into the monster and struck a glancing blow with a hammer. The monster fell to his knees. "Get up!" she shrieked to Prometheon, her voice digging into his bones like nails. He scrambled to his feet as the second monster gripped her by the throat, picking her up with ease and slamming her hard to the ground. "Run!" He stopped and turned to see the monster standing over her, his blade driven through her body, even as her hands gripped his breastplate. They slipped down, falling to her sides lifelessly. She was dead. He saw the monster jerk the sword from her body. She was dead. The monster took a step towards him, ignoring the gruesome damage to the face of his partner. Not his mother. She was dead. The monster brought his blade up for a killing strike, and Prometheon could not move. No. A man burst from the foliage, and the monster stepped back, retiming his strike. They met in a flash of steel. "You might want to run now, young one. Run to the forest." He looked up at the man, who was holding the monster at bay with a thinner sword. The monster looked from the man to Prometheon, and a growl escaped his lips. When they come, run for the forest. That's what she'd said to him. "Run, young one," the man grunted. Prometheon scrambled to his feet, tears streaming down his cheeks. The second monster blocked his way. Prometheon slid to a stop as the monster moved forward. A second monk leaped into the fray, carrying two swords and wielding them at the same time. He fought the bigger monster, fearlessly pushing him back with speed and ferocity. The monster took two sword blows, the first mangling his lower jaw, and the second bit deep into the armor of his ribs. But still, he ran the second monk through the chest with his massive broadsword. Monster and monk both fell to their knees. Melthio's teeth ground together as his anger rose. Morpheus must not think him a failure. He stood up from the table, disgusted at the thought of revealing himself to chase a human child. That was the work of the vanquishers. And they'd failed. The others would never catch up to him in time to give proper chase. Those monks had no business being anywhere near the town. And even if they had been, why did they have weapons? It stank of Cassiopeia. He stepped through a doorway into the blinding light and disappeared. The monk tended to his partner, who was quickly dying. Back towards the small village, a boom echoed through the air, reaching him and his fallen comrade. The remains of the small village collapsed with a low rumble, and a fresh cloud of thick dust joined the smoke billowing into the air. It was over. A weak tug at his wrist brought him back to his dying friend.
"Yeah,"
his friend gurgled. The monk felt tears slide down his cheeks. "Yeah, it's okay." He nodded, and with a final weak squeeze of his friend's wrist, he died. The monk closed his eyelids with the tips of his fingers and rested his hand on his face. Quietly, he shed tears and mourned his comrade. Something landed hard in the sand, sending a small cloud of it washing over the monk and his dead comrade. The dust cleared, and Melthio stepped forward, looking around him. He smelled the air, his mouth turning down in disgust. It wasn't only the air. He stared at the sweaty, teary-eyed mess in front of him. Leave, or meet the same fate as the first. The boy is not yours, the swordsman said, pointing his blade at Melthios. He slowly rose from his friend's body and studied the person standing in front of him. The similarities he shared with the goddess were obvious. The same smooth, flawless skin, the same chiseled physique, draped in otherworldly fabrics. If he was like her, then he would be joining his fallen brother much sooner than he'd anticipated. Melthios glanced at the blade and then looked past it. The forest rose in front of him, thick with greenery. It swallowed whatever went inside, and the boy had gone inside.
Which direction did you send him?
He asked the monk. He got a laugh as a response. A deep, throaty laugh that carried through the air. A laugh that came entirely at his expense. To her. Melthios attacked, taking one leap forward. The monk swung his sword horizontally, but was much too late. Melthios raised his left hand, blocking the blade of the sword, shattering it, and shoving forward with his right hand into the monk's chest. The monk dropped his useless sword and attempted to bring his arm towards Melthios' face. Melthios snorted as he casually moved his head aside and let loose a hellish torrent of lightning. The monk screamed, and then he burned. He burned and burned. Melthios stepped back, letting what was left of the crisped carcass hit the ground in front of him. He closed his eyes. He could hear something moving through the forest clumsily, slowly. With a gust of wind, he sailed forward, crashing through the foliage after the boy. Branches snapped or bent, giving way to him as he barreled through.
I know you are here! Show yourself!
He could see Prometheon falter, losing balance as he looked over his shoulder. Melthios swung his arm out, crashing through a rotted tree in his path. He summoned a bolt of lightning and cocked his arm back to throw. Something hit him in the chest, hard. The bolt spun away from him, burning through branches and setting a tree on fire as he hit the ground and rolled through dirt and dead leaves. He was on his feet in an instant, spinning until a woman's figure caught his eye. Cassiopeia, standing with the boy, protecting him. She had a dagger in her other hand. He hadn't sensed her presence, hadn't felt her creep up, hadn't felt her use a doorway. Where had she come from?
Cassiopeia, I should have known you would interfere. I never thought you would. I never thought you would risk your life for a human child. What is he to you?
What is he to you, Melthios, that you would take his life and his home?
That is none of your concern.
I should say the same thing to you, Melthios.
Step away from him, Cassiopeia, or you will surely die. Do you want to die?
Not particularly, but it is not your place to kill me. You aren't good enough.
He blinked at her. Cassiopeia was insanely talented at keeping her opponents off balance, emotional. This time was no different.
Not good enough?
Electricity crackled to his hands, and he raised both of them in her direction.
Defagor!
He bellowed. Lightning burst from his hands in thick streaks, tearing through tree limbs and tree trunks, and setting the wood ablaze, singeing the very air. Cassiopeia erupted in a fireball, thick smoke swallowing the place where she had once stood. Melthios lowered his hands and walked forward. There would be nothing left of the body of the boy, but Cassiopeia was much more fortified. He would see her naked, blackened corpse, smoldering, and her daggers still in her hand.
God Thunder?
Melthios stopped, only 15 feet away from the smoke now, and to his horror, Cassiopeia still lived. He could see her through the smoke, and so did the boy.
Melthios, I hate to inform you of this, but your lightning doesn't affect me.
What? Impossible.
I have developed a counter for every single lightning attack you have.
He stared at her for a few moments. She didn't move, didn't make an attempt to attack him.
We're leaving now, Melfios.
No!
He snarled as an answer to her statement, and an answer to everything that was going wrong with this entire operation. He would not fail. He raised his hand, the fingers charged with energy. The boy would die, and Cassiopeia would die with him.
Fulgur Hastum!
Melfios screamed, throwing a bolt of lightning. The swollen projectile hurtled towards Cassiopeia and the boy at point-blank range. But they were gone, winking out of existence in a split second. The spear of energy hit the ground. A huge plume of dirt and rocks flew up, smashing down trees as the shockwave rippled through the earth. The dust settled, and Melfios could see a shaft, 10 feet across, gouged diagonally into the dirt. Smoke rose from it into the sky. He could feel his hands tingling. He'd summoned too much energy at once. His hands were burned and bleeding. Clenching his fingers together intensified the pain. He deserved it. The boy had gotten away. Cassiopeia had gotten away from them again. He felt a tiny droplet of sweat drip down his forehead and onto his nose. He was breathing hard. He hadn't summoned that much energy in such a sudden fashion in a long time. Rage trembled through him, followed by waves of hot anger. He clenched his fists, pain shooting up both his arms.
Cassiopeia, you bitch! You'll pay for this!
He screamed. He would have to return to the sanctuary and explain why he failed. He would have to admit to Morpheus that his premonition had proved correct. He would have to admit that he'd been outdone, outwitted.
Damn it!
He roared, opening a doorway and disappearing into it.